Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol. Nitai Go Premanandi. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Stotra Kashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Chan Arvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Stotra Kashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kori Vaishnav Vrind Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की मथुरा धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की मायापुर धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की युगदामर श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ के Srila Prabhupada Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning's Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Canto 3, chapter 26, verse number 28. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, chapter 26, verse number 28. Yad vidurhi anirudakyam Rishikanam Adishwaram Sharade Dindvarasyamam Samradhyam Yogi Bisanai Yad Vidurhi Anirudakyam Rishikanamadishwaram Sharade Dimvarashyamam Samradhyam Yogi Bisanai. Word for word translation. Yat, which mind, Vidhu is known. He, indeed. Aniruddhakyam, by the name Aniruddha. Rishikanam, of the senses. Adhishwaram, the supreme ruler. Sharada, autumnal. Indivara, like a blue lotus. Shyamam, bluish. Samradhyam, who is found. Yogibi, by the yogis. Shanai, gradually. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. Purport. The system of yoga entails controlling the mind, and the lord of the mind is Aniruddha. It is stated that Aniruddha is four-handed with Sudarshan chakra, conch shell, club, and lotus flower. There are 24 forms of Vishnu, each differently named. Among these 24 forms, Sankarshana, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Vasudeva are depicted very nicely in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it is stated that Aniruddha is worshipped by the yogis. Meditation upon voidness is a modern invention of the fertile brain of some speculator. Actually, the process of yoga meditation as prescribed in this verse should be fixed upon the form of Aniruddha. By meditating on Aniruddha, one can become free from the agitation of acceptance and rejection. When one's mind is fixed upon Aniruddha, one gradually becomes God-realized. He approaches the pure state of Krishna consciousness, which is the ultimate goal of yoga. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we'll be reading from Canto 3, chapter 26, verse number 28. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. So we're reading this chapter, which is titled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And in the previous chapter, Mother Devahuti asks a question to Lord Kapila to expound on the principles, requesting him to explain what Prabhupada translated as the Sankhya philosophy. So obviously when we're reading it, at times we feel, we just can't understand it. Sankhya is difficult, but as Srila Prabhupada would say, if you read something and it doesn't make sense, you just keep reading it again. Keep reading it again. In one pastime of Srila Prabhupada, in the Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated that moon is further than the sun. There's a description there. So there was a disciple of Prabhupada, she asked Prabhupada, it doesn't make sense. And he said, read it again. She read it again. She's like, Prabhupada, still doesn't make sense. She read it a few times. She's like, now it makes sense. He's like, okay, then that's how it is. Once you keep reading it, the sound vibration enters into our ear. It actually purifies the consciousness. There was a court case once in the very early days where the devotees, I'm not sure if this was to do with the brainwashing case, but there was a lawsuit in America. And somehow or the other, the devotee that was chosen to represent the devotee's case was someone who was quite, by his nature, was a very nervous person. So, he felt he wasn't cut for this, for this service that he was asked to. And then all of a sudden, he, the judge on the opposite side, can't remember if it was a defendant or a plaintiff, but the judge on the opposite side started asking him all these very intriguing and, questions that, he wasn't prepared for. And he just, his anxiety just worsened. And then all of a sudden he said, who all were there? Who all were the people present? And then he said, oh, Aniruddha was there, Sankarshan was there. He was naming the devotees that were present in that, in that scenario that he was describing. Krishna was there, he was just saying the first names. And as he was repeating these names, he could feel a sense of, there was a power that was way beyond his reach that he was being able to access to, that was giving him the strength to now do things, or now to speak or defend in a way that he wouldn't have been able. So he was calling on the mercy of these personalities. So similarly with Sankhya philosophy, I was listening to a class by His Holiness Ramapad Maharaj on this section, and he was describing that Sankhya actually establishes a sambandha gyan. So do we need it to go back to Godhead? What if I don't understand it? Because we may read this whole chapter or this whole section. There are a few chapters, obviously following this, that will be speaking on Sankhya philosophy. We may say, oh, so what about it? Now I've heard this, now what? Now what is, we are surrounded by material energy, as Krishna says in the 7th chapter. Bhumi rapi nalo vayu kham buddhir mana evacha. These are my separated energies. And when we understand how Krishna's energies are working and what do we need to cross through them to get to Krishna's internal potency, then it establishes a sambandha gyan. And for us to understand what's a conditioned existence, what are we up against, what are the forces that are working on us, and how do we gain free from these forces. So, like I said, purification is taking place at all levels. We may not see it, but actually purification is taking place. So just to give context to what's happened here, in this verse it's describing the mind being, the lord of the mind being Aniruddha, but just preceding these verses there's a context that's given, and it's described a bit more elaborately in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that in a corner of the spiritual sky appears a cloud, which is, for our purposes, it's the pradhana. And then Lord Mahavishnu glances upon this pradhana and injects time and the living entities, because both of them actually come from Krishna, or from our previous state. We are wound up in the body of Mahavishnu, and then it's injected into it. And then from there, the pradhana is just prior to its state of manifestation is known as pradhana, and then after manifestation it's mahatattva. Maharaj was actually he was giving an example that was described to him by Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, and he was describing it as being, Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj was describing, this whole thing to be a primordial soup. In your soup you have water, you have different vegetables, you have different spices, and then you have fire too. So what happens when you boil the soup, continuously? When you just keep boiling it, it becomes broth. And in that broth, everything's undifferentiated, right? You don't know what's potato, what's broccoli, what's whatever you would throw in a soup. That is actually the pradhana. And to reverse engineer it becomes the mahatattva. So where you basically start differentiating. So there's false ego that is the first item or the first element that starts to differentiate from it. So why false ego? Because we need a false identity in this material world to even function. So when we come in this world, we have to take on an identity. For example, I just, as I started my recent, I just changed jobs. And the day I walked into my office, they handed me an ID card. And this is the identity by which you'll enter into the office. And you have your login and so on and so forth. So that is the identity that's given to me. And I'm designated a personnel ID or whatever it is for personnel purposes. So I'm given in this material world, we're given a false identity. Because we are coming here to enjoy independent of Krishna. So as I said, as Maharaj was describing, the reverse engineering process is done by the mahatattva, where elements start to differentiate. And false ego separates out, that's the first thing separates out, and then in interaction with the three modes, the first, what we're describing here, when false ego comes in contact with goodness, it's mind that comes into existence. Now one may ask, but in the Bhagavad Gita we've heard, intelligence as being higher than the mind, and tomorrow actually, I think Vrajanath Prabhu, or the speaker that will be speaking on this, is actually describing intelligence. So, shouldn't be the other way around. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says in the Bhagavad Gita, intelligence is situated higher than the mind, because that's the intelligence that's referred to. The intelligence that's referred to in the Bhagavad Gita is coming from Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So that intelligence is needed for us to discern what's, how to get out of these clutches of material existence. So now here we have it, the mind, and obviously it is said here the mind has a deity, and for us to gain release from the mind, we should worship Lord Aniruddha. In the next canto, when we get to it, chapter 24, I believe. Let me see. Which one is it? Yep, chapter 24, verse number 36. Lord Shiva is saying this: Namo, Namo Niruddhaya, Rishi Shenendratmane, Nama Paramahamsaya, Purnaya Nibratatmane. My Lord, as the supreme directing deity, known as Aniruddha, you are the master of the senses and the mind. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you again and again. You are known as Ananta, as well as Sankarshana, because of your ability to destroy the whole creation by the blazing fire from your mouth. So even though the worshipable deity of Lord Shiva is Sankarshan, but here he's praying to Aniruddha to gain release here. So when I was reading this, I came across a section in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. It is chapter 89. Those that may not remember it right away. The story of Krishna taking Arjuna through the universal layers to go and see Mahavishnu. So corresponding to that, there's another section in the Brihad Bhagavatam. And it's very beautifully described. The Gop Kumar is actually, he's been given this mantra and he's traveling through the different layers of the universe. So as we understand, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, these are the 7 layers, 7 coverings of the universe. And from top down, it progresses from subtle to gross, and for us to go from here to there, it's from gross to subtle. So the first covering that's covering us is earth, and then water, and it's described that each covering is actually 10 times more thicker than the other one. So Gop Kumar, when he's traveling through these different layers, obviously the first layer that he reaches is earth. And when he reaches this layer, or you may say the boundary, what does he see? Who is the worshipable deity? Any guess? Lord Varahadev, and he is being worshipped by Bhudevi. And then he goes on to the next fire, water, the next layer, and on each layer that he actually reaches, he actually sees the ingredients, which is all of them, and then as he progresses further, one ingredient gets superseded by the other. So there's in earth, you obviously, as we understand, we have all the 5 ingredients, and then in water we have 4. So when he reaches the shores of the layer of water, what does he see? The presiding deity is Lord Matsya. And then fire is Lord Surya Narayana. So the sun god is an expansion of the Lord. And then interestingly, when he reaches through, and in each of these layers, he's asked by the presiding goddess or the deity that is overseeing it to please stay and enjoy the opulences that is being offered in that realm. So in each, he realized as he's getting further and further away from the gross to the subtle, the pleasures are also, taking a different shape and form. So it's described elaborately in the Brihad Bhagavatam, which, we don't have time to, but what I'm getting to is that when he gets to the final layer, which is the primordial nature. If you read the 89th chapter of also in the Krishna book, but in the 10th canto, Arjuna, when Krishna's chariot is passing through this layer, he finds this layer to be as dense as mud. That is how dense it is. So primordial nature, Prakriti, or what you call Mahatattva, the shell is so dense that he feels it as dense as mud. And as soon as he reaches that, who is the presiding deity? Mohini Murti. The Lord's disguise, Mohini Murti, to bewilder the Asuras and Lord Shiva. And being worshipped by Maya Devi herself. And Maya Devi says, this form of the Lord is even way more attractive than me. So we can picture a lot of time when we see, Maya's, some people may say, Maya is just so attractive, but how much more attractive is the Lord? We see Lord Shiva say this in the 8th canto. My Lord, in one way, Krishna is trying to say that no one can bewilder Lord Shiva other than he himself. So similarly, that whole pastime was exhibited to, in one sense, show that Lord Shiva comes under the control of Lord Vishnu, but it's his love for him that in the end, even after he's been in the external sense humiliated, but he feels joyful. He just feels, what more could I have expected of my master? So, what is that color of that primordial nature? The color of Shyam. And he's feeling, and understand this, that this is on the cusp of Brahma Jyoti. This is, right after this will be Brahma Jyoti, and then he'll be entering into that. But on that layer, so in each layer, he was being asked to stay there, and he was being forced to some extent to be there, but he knew he had to keep on moving. But in that layer, he's feeling, because of the color of a primordial nature, being the color of his deity, Shyam, he's feeling a sense of belonging there. And all of a sudden, Lord Shiva comes to the associates and hey, you got to go. You've got to come up to, I'm forgetting, Viraja, across the Viraja River, and so to the abode of Lord Shiva. So what I'm getting to is that, and what this purport is saying is that ultimately, Srila Prabhupada makes a point here, meditation upon voidness is a modern invention of the fertile brain of some speculator. So we understand there's a personality behind everything. Even if we see our body, the way our body is arranged, the functions of our body are actually being controlled by a demigod. But then the demigod is actually getting those powers or their empowerment to do certain things from the Lord itself, which is in the form of a deity. In this case, it's Lord Aniruddha. In the next one, it'll be Lord Pradyumna. So we understand that there are no accidents. Everything is happening by a cosmic arrangement, and it's being delineated here. So for us to understand this, strengthens our sambandha gyan, and then allows us to serve the Lord, and allows us to serve the instructions of our spiritual master. So then moving on, this verse here speaks on the mind. And it says the system of yoga entails controlling the mind, and the Lord of the mind is Aniruddha. So the function of the mind is acceptance and rejection. Right? Accept what's favorable, reject what's unfavorable, as Rupa Goswami described in Nectar of Devotion. Now, these two things are needed for events to take place. It's natural, it just can't happen that we just accept. If we reject, because material energy is such that it not only does it throw, a lot of times when we think of our mind giving us grief when we are in distressful situation, but we don't really realize, leave aside the distressful situation, but when we are in a good, so-called happy situation, for example, if I were to choose where to go to today, I'll give an example in a second, but if you were to just choose what to buy, if you had to go traveling, and we had to buy a suitcase, and there were 10 different options that we had, we'll have to choose which one to go for, and our mind will just play all these tricks that, let's go for this, let's go for that, but ultimately that's needed for events to take place, and that's how this world is designed. In the next verse, which I don't want to speak into, but it talks of intelligence. Intelligence gives strength to the mind. So on the spiritual front, once I was remembering Ganesham Prabhu describing his interaction with his Holiness Devamrita Swami, and he was telling Maharaj, when he's out on book distribution, he sees people, obviously, when we're going out to distribute books, we try to give, we try to share this with as many people as we can. So Prabhu was saying that when he saw Maharaj, he asked Maharaj, when I'm seeing people out on the streets, I want to give them a book, but I see them in a happy situation. They're smiling and they're having a good time, and my mind is like, why should I give them a book because they're already happy? And Maharaj said, because you're seeing through your mind, but you need to see through the Shastra. Shastra say that everyone is suffering. So what you're seeing is actually happiness, is actually their suffering. His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami recently was giving a class in Vrindavan. And someone asked him a question that, yes, I understand that there's suffering, but I'm happy in whatever situation I'm in. I don't need this. You're telling me all this, but I'm content with everything I have. And Maharaj responded to him that yeah, because the question in sense was asking, do we stop sense gratification? And Maharaj was saying, no, we regulate sense gratification. And he was saying that in our experience, or as per the Bhagavad Gita, when we try to, happiness, to increase happiness, one has to take on the mode of passion. We expand happiness to mode of passion. We don't actually expand happiness to mode of goodness, which means that, today if I have this, only tomorrow if I expect my happiness quotient to go a bit higher, that means that I have to expand on passion. And we generally see when we take on the mode of passion, it brings upon some suffering. So for example, today, if I'm working in this profession and tomorrow I want to change my profession, that means that I'll have to undertake some sort of training or qualification, which means that there'll be some austerity that I'll have to take. And because of that austerity, that means that I have to make some adjustments, which is, to some extent, I'll be suffering because I'll be seeing someone else making use of that time which I would be wanting to use, and now I'm not. So there's actually some suffering involved. And the more we expand on that, expand our happiness through mode of passion, we actually find suffering. So mind is such, accepting and rejecting, and that always will be the case. However, as Lord Shiva described, if we take shelter of Lord Aniruddha as he is, then we are actually safe and secure. We understand, we are actually fixed in that position of understanding that, okay, somehow or the other there is an acceptance of the source, which is Krishna. And in that way, we can actually manage our expectations. So His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, because he speaks quite a bit on this mind, he had actually shared quite a nice few anecdotes. And he said that, I'll just read from it. The mind tends to do what we don't intend to do. So a lot of times when we make a decision to pursue something in a certain way, quite often we find ourselves doing the exact opposite. Today I'll wake up, I set my alarm and I want to wake up early, but then I'll wake up a bit later than what I wanted to do because of my past samskaras, past impressions. So he was describing how a floor, if there's water in a floor, it'll naturally flow in the direction that is going downward. So one way to stop it is obviously you construct the floor in such a way that it goes in the opposite direction of what you want to go. So again, as I was saying, taking instruction from the intelligence, which is actually higher than the mind, coming through Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, will help us, as is described in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, when, in fact, even if you see, in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, for one who has conquered the mind the best of friends and the worst of enemies. But there's another verse that I found quite interesting. One who has conquered the mind, what's already reached? Super soul already reached. So a lot of time when we see, I can't speak to Krishna. I would like Krishna to speak to me. Well, have you conquered your mind? If you haven't conquered your mind, then how can we, because our mind always tells us stories, and a lot of time we don't have to give in to those stories. One Maharaj, I can't remember his name, but he was once saying that, one devotee was actually with the Maharaj, and all of a sudden he just started laughing, and he said that, "Oh, why are you laughing, Maharaj?" "I'm laughing because my mind just told me something, and I was like, how can I?" It gave me a proposal which was something I can't even imagine, but it's throwing to us all these proposals, and we That's why we need intelligence to discern. Again, this feeds into the next verse, so this will be discussed tomorrow. So mind is very powerful. Like I said, as Gopkumar is passing through these layers, he's finding the deity for each of these elements, or each of these layers. So we keep our mind busy, obviously, by focusing on the holy name, focusing on service, and just somehow or the other always remaining in the mood of service and always begging the Vaishnavas, begging the Lord, begging our spiritual master, please. The moment we understand that bhakti is given, bhakti is awarded, even though bhakti is within our heart, but it's given and it's awarded to us, that's when we truly start appreciating the gift or the treasure that we have. So like I said, this section on Sankhya philosophy, it can seem bewildering just for us to even understand what's being described here in a verse such as cosmic intelligence. In the next verse, you'll see sleep and apprehension and how they're being applied. But as Prabhupada explained, you just keep reading it, we keep discussing it, and we keep asking the Lord for intelligence, and then it actually does, help us. So today we're very fortunate. It's a very, very auspicious day. We won't have time to discuss each and every festival or each and every occasion, but it's the appearance of Shyamananda Prabhu, who is actually very close to Narottam Das Thakur, Shri Vamshivadan Thakur appearance, Shri Krishna Vasandarasa, and Shri Balaram Rasayatra. So Shyamananda Prabhu, Srinivasacharya, and Shri Narottam Das Thakur were internal associates, Shri Gaurasundar. In fact, it is said that these three were actually the first book distribution party that actually started book distribution. So, very important day. Somehow we should, on days such as these, we beg for mercy from these personalities to help us come closer to Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai, Shri Balaram, Jagannath Balaram, Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra, and to the instructions of Srila Prabhupada and our Guru Varga, and always remain in the association of devotees. I think let's say 8:45. I'll end if anyone has just one question or comment. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Mm-hmm. No, moon worships. So the moon, we worship Aniruddha through the moon planet. So for example, when I was saying here, in each of those layers of Gopkumar is passing, the presiding deity of earth, or the expansion of the Lord. So the way it is described is that there's false ego in the mode of goodness, false ego in the mode of passion, the one that gives direction, you can say, it doesn't complicate things, but the one that gives direction to it is an expansion of the Lord. And then underneath that is the demigod. So for example, in our body, there are these different, there are different demigods controlling our bodily movements, but they're actually subservient to an expansion of the Lord. So that's how we understand. So in some places, Prabhupada also writes, to get free from mental disturbance, one worships Lord Aniruddha, but then he also says the moon god. So because the moon god is getting empowerment from Aniruddha. In this case, yes. But again, when we take on the direct, this is again Sankhya philosophy. What is Sankhya philosophy? To decipher through material causes, material effects to the causes. So the causes and the effect. A material example, the consciousness of the architecture carries the consciousness of the architect. The painting carries the consciousness of the painter. So the causes and the effect, as cause and effect, even though they may seem different, but actually the causes and the effect as well. So that's how it is to be understood, that these two personalities, cause and effect. Yep. Yep, the different, yeah. Well, this has been elaborately described in Laghu Bhagavatamrita, these 24, where they are stationed. My understanding is that these three come into existence. So these 24 are in the spiritual sky, basically in the Vaikuntha planets. That's how they're actually. That's my understanding. And, I'll have to look into it. But these three actually come into existence, or they assume roles in relation to this material world. So on the other side of the Viraja river, in the Vaikuntha planet. But you can refer to Laghu Bhagavatamrita, or in Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is described in where Lord Chaitanya is speaking to Sanatan Goswami, and so he describes it, but it's expanded further in Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Thank you. Okay, we'll end you. Thank you again. Shri Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Go Premanandi. Srila Prabhupada ki.